Coming up on the SBS On The Money podcast, job ad scams rising, uranium stocks leads the markets higher, and we take a closer look at Donald Trump's influence over global markets. That's next. Hi everyone, it is Friday the 23rd of May 2025. The Australian share market rising today, the S&P ASX 200 up 0.15%. We'll have the details with Dianne Colledge from Morgans in a few moments. But first, the ACCC says it removed more than 29,000 scam social media accounts and nearly 1,900 fake job ads as more of them pop up, hitting unsuspecting job seekers. For more, Rhayna Bosch spoke with the Deputy Chairwoman of the ACCC, Catriona Lowe.
So we see at the National Anti-Scam Centre a number of variants of job scams. The main type, where we see victims losing quite substantial amounts of money, is where the scammers go to quite elaborate lengths to create the illusion of a real job. So a person might apply for a job that involves online task-based employment. They might have what seems to be a group chat with other employees. They will go through a process that looks like a recruitment process. This is all an elaborate ruse to encourage a person to make small initially and then big payments to unlock alleged earnings that they've made through performing these tasks. But in fact, it's all an elaborate ruse to obtain those payments. And it's only when a person stops paying, typically, that it becomes clear that this was all a scam. The other two types of jobs and employment scams to be aware of are ones where a consumer may be encouraged to use their bank account to make and receive payments. This is in fact potentially being part of a scam using your bank account as what's called a mule account. And the third type is where a potential employee might be encouraged to make payments to receive qualifications that they need for the job. So that might be checks and things like that. But of course, there's no job, there's no checks being done. It's just another way, unfortunately, of obtaining money from scam victims. One of the reasons that we decided to do a fusion cell in relation to these scam types is that we saw in 2023 that jobs and employment scams were one of the fastest growing scam types that we saw. We saw over 150% increase in the number of reports that were being made to our Scam Watch service about these scams. The other dimension of a jobs and employment scam that really makes it such an important candidate for action is, of course, people who are looking for work in difficult economic circumstances are already vulnerable. And we see some particularly vulnerable members of our community being disproportionately impacted by this scam. So it might be international students, people on low incomes, people from a culturally and linguistically diverse background, and people that might otherwise find it difficult to secure employment. So these are all reasons that we felt it was particularly important to bring the real focused attention that a fusion cell brings to this type of scam.
So how can a potential victim spot these scams, and what can they do once they have?
So there are a few signs to be particularly wary of in relation to jobs and employment scams. The key one is if you're being asked to pay money to make money. That is a really big red flag that what you're dealing with may in fact be a scam. The other thing to be aware of is we are hearing a lot of reports from consumers that they've received initially an unsolicited approach. So that could be a text message, it could be a WhatsApp message or similar, reaching out unexpected. And that again is a sign to be on your guard. about the message that you've received. Another feature is often this type of employment that's offered will offer quite substantial returns for relatively simple work. All of these things should be big signs that you need to go and do some checks about the messages that you've received. We also know that a number of quite high-profile, well-known recruitment businesses have been impersonated by scammers in this area. So if you think it could be a legitimate offer or opportunity, the very best thing to do is independently check. So don't click on links, don't call the numbers that might be in that message, separately go to that company's website or separately find their phone number and make sure that what you're dealing with is legit.
That's Catriona Lowe there, the Deputy Chairwoman of the ACCC. Now, Market Day on the SBS On The Money podcast. The Australian share market now, which closed this Friday up 0.2% to 8,360. Of the 11 sectors on that index, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them rose, 5 fell. The best performing sector, property, the worst, utilities. For more on the day's market action and for her take on Donald Trump's influence on the markets, I spoke with Dianne Colledge, a private client advisor at Morgans. Di, so the ASX is up today. Why? And to what extent has yesterday's concerns about US bond market been alleviated?
It's an interesting question, Ricardo. Basically, the market has actually fallen back later on this afternoon. So we've actually seen it pull back to only being up around 10 to 14 points. I think that's more relevant to what's happening in the US and where we see the implications of what Trump's about to say overnight. And this happens on a regular basis, particularly on a Friday around the end of the week, where we've got a couple of days for him to say something and then global markets will react. With respect to the US bond market, I don't really think that's impacting us today at all, to be honest.
So when you look at who's driving the market, what kind of sectors are moving?
Interesting question. So what we've seen today, following on from what happened last night in the US, is around the uranium stocks, because again, Trump has turned around and said that he would like to sign some executive orders, and this has been reported on Reuters, that will alleviate some of the regulatory paperwork around setting up new reactors. So what that has sort of driven our market today, where we've got our uranium stocks, and we've got 3 in particular. So Boss Energy's up 11%, Deep Yellow's up 9%, and Paladin is up 8.9%. So they're the key drivers of our market today.
There are a few company announcements, but the ones that caught my eye today, in particular, Myer, only because it has its finger on the pulse on the way consumers are spending and feeling at the moment, and also because it had that recent acquisition of the apparel brand. So is there anything interesting in there for you?
Absolutely. So Myer has highlighted that, there is a discount war at the moment that's eating into their margins. The Olivia Wirth, who's the recent CEO into Myers, has said that consumers are reining in their spending in line with the cost of living pressures. Now, that report that we have seen come out of their company today hasn't possibly taken into account the recent interest rate cut that we saw this week. So they've got an investor day coming up in the end of May. So that may give us a little bit more colour around how they're seeing the consumer going forward. Interestingly, comparative to what's happened globally, we've seen in the US that a lot of the retailers came out this week with their reports as well. And big names such as Target was down 5%, VF Corp, which owns North Face, Vans and Timberland, was also down 15%. And Deckers, who owns Hoka, which is a footwear brand, and UGG was also down 15%. And then if you move to the US, JD Sports was down 10%, and Marks and Spencer, which is probably quite reflective of Myers, reported a 24% drop in profit. So that's all around the consumer behaviour.
And given we're still seeing volatility on the markets, right, I'm keen to know a bit at the end of this conversation about how you're feeling as an investor, right? What are you telling your clients? Are there opportunities for investors? And you were talking about how the markets are moving on how whatever Donald Trump says or does, right? Have you ever seen a time where one person has so much control over the market?
Never. It is quite a unique experience to live through this. Now, I've been quite fortunate. I've been in the market for quite some time, and I've lived through the GFC, COVID, and not showing my age, but dating right back to the 87 crash. But this is the first time that one person has definitely had such an incredible influence on how markets react, just through whatever comes out of his mouth, to be honest. When it comes to opportunities for my clients right now, I'm doing a bit of tax time housekeeping. And that just looks at telling self-managed super fund clients about making sure that they've had their pension payments paid out by the end of financial year, also looking at their super contributions, and then also looking at sort of creating some income now that their bank deposits were delivering less of a return. So we've sort of identified that there are some really good key quality stocks out there that are paying fantastic dividends. And they're where I'm sort of looking to sort of allocate some capital. Amcor, for example, that pays quarterly dividends, and that's yielding around 6.4%. Dalrymple Bay, which is a coal terminal up in Queensland, that also pays on a quarterly basis, and that's delivering 7.1%, including the value of the franking credits. Ultimately, there are a few other property trusts that also pay quarterly, and those yields can be up to between 6 and 7%. So when you compare that now to what you can get at a term deposit, which was around 4.25%, it does create a bit more of a return for a client that is looking to sort of offset that drop in interest rates. Understandably, it's not cash, but you can choose lower risk options.
That is Dianne Colledge there from Morgans. Don't forget, if you enjoy the podcast, to give it a rating or review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and to click that subscribe button. This SBS On The Money stream is provided for informational purposes only. The content in this stream should not be understood as constituting advice or a recommendation. It is not personal advice, and it does not consider your personal circumstances or objectives. You should contact a licensed professional before making any financial decision.